When the Russian military attempted to drive into the Ukrainian capital Kyiv back in February, Moscow thought the invasion would be over in a matter of days. Instead, the conflict has now dragged into its 15th week. Russia's aggressive tactics galvanised the US and NATO to rapidly arm the Ukrainian military, which applied fierce resistance.
It's Russia that is attacking Ukraine, not the other way around. And simply put, the best way to avoid escalation is for Russia to stop the aggression and the war that it started. It's fully within its power to do so.
The front lines have changed vastly in 3 months. Russia has now regrouped and is targeting territory in the east of Ukraine. The conflict has largely devolved into a grinding artillery battle. Both sides are trading barrages over pockmarked farmland. Contested towns and cities are being decimated.
President Putin made a strategic mistake. He totally underestimated the strength and the will and the ability of the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian armed forces, to defend themselves.
Russian soldiers were initially killed in their thousands as tanks ran out of fuel and infantry morale sank, making them easy targets for Ukrainian forces. Now Ukraine is reportedly suffering mass casualties as its conscripted territorial defence units are reportedly thrown into the front line with very basic training. Ukraine has repeatedly accused Russia of war crimes, including forcefully taking its children away.
The inevitability of punishment is a principle that Ukraine will teach Russia. But first of all, we must teach them on the battlefield that Ukraine will not be conquered, that our people will not surrender, and our children will not become the property of the occupiers.
President Putin has made limited appearances on Russian TV during the war. Even rarer, his appearances in public. It's raised regular questions from analysts about his health, ranging from cancer to a degenerative condition, concerns the Kremlin furiously rejects. Deep fears remain about how desperate President Putin may become if the Russian military cannot achieve some kind of victory.
The Russian soldiers who put their health and lives at risk for the sake of people and children of Donbas, for the sake of Russia, they are all heroes. Each of them puts their life in mortal danger going into this consciously, and we must treat them as heroes.
Antony Beevor is a military historian who's been closely following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. His latest book is Russia, Revolution and Civil War, 1917 to 1921. Mr. Beevor, you've said that no country is as much a prisoner of its past as Russia. What do you mean by that?
Well, Russia has been trapped in its history, going all the way back even to the 13th century and the Mongol invasions, with its own ideas of national narrative and self-image and all the rest of it. The idea that it's continually surrounded by enemies and being attacked from all sides. And Putin has very much convinced himself that this is the case. He has a completely distorted view of history. And has convinced himself that somehow NATO is preparing to attack his country. And he's tried to persuade the whole of the citizenship of Russia that this is the case.
Is there anyone there in his circle who would ever actually speak up and say, well, this actually is not the case?
Unfortunately not. Some of them agree with him very, very strongly and share this same sort of Slav nationalist ideology. But no, not really. There is Sergei Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, who is very much of a crony of Putin's. But he's not somebody who really is able to tell the boss exactly what is going wrong.
We live in an era where you can entirely paralyse a country by knocking out the internet, for example, and mobile phone communications. Given that, why is Putin waging a war that involves tanks and guns and razing cities and so on?
Well, again, this is an obsession with the past. For Putin, the greatest moment of Russian history is the victory in 1945. Everything is directed in that particular sort of propaganda line. The 9th of May, you know, whether it's the question of the tanks rolling across Red Square and all the rest of it, Putin is obsessed with these symbols of victory in 1945. And this actually has been one of the problems in the way they've been fighting the war, the way he has been micromanaging it. Ironically, he's been much more like Hitler, who was even controlling little movements of small pockets of troops, unlike Stalin, who by that stage of the war had given the generals their heads. And I think this has been a real disadvantage for the Russian military.
But what are his motivations?
Well, his motivations really are the restoration of not just the Soviet Union, but really the old Russian Empire. All of the symbols around him actually are Tsarist symbols rather than Soviet ones. I mean, in that great white hall in the Kremlin, with the long, ridiculous long table where he interrogates people, he is surrounded by 4 statues of Tsars. All of the symbols on his palace on the Black Sea are the double-headed eagle. So Putin's view is of Imperial Russia even more than of the Soviet Union.
In your new book, Russia, Revolution and Civil War, you refer regularly to morale during the Russian Civil War in the early part of the 20th century and the role it played from soldiers to civilians. From what we hear of what's going on in Ukraine, Ukrainian citizens are united and motivated, whereas Russian troops are not. Can something like morale make a significant difference when a tiny country like Ukraine is so outgunned militarily by Russia?
Yes, it can. When you have troops who have been badly treated, and this was also the case of Red Army troops during the Second World War, and it ended with a number of mutinies right at the end of the war. We're seeing mutinies again, but we're also seeing a repetition of the brutality of Russian troops, and this has raised a number of debates recently on to what degree, as one writer recently said, you know, where does this casual savagery come from? And in a way, the answer is it goes back to those Mongol invasions and the idea that the only way of waging war is through conspicuous cruelty. And there is a totally casual attitude towards looting, rape, the destruction of civilian houses, and even the killing of civilians. And we've been seeing this in Ukraine, and this is why the Ukrainians, I think, are resisting as desperately as they are. And I think that that is why, even if Russia manages to occupy more territory, it is going to find itself facing a desperate guerrilla campaign.
Intelligence agencies and Ukrainian allies did not predict President Zelensky turning out to be the singular figure that he has been. How do you account for his unexpected steal?
Well, I think people have slightly underestimated Zelensky, thinking of him as a comic actor. Zelensky was much more than a comic actor. He was a brilliant scriptwriter too. And this is where I think it's emerged how incredibly clever he has been in handling his relations across the world with leaders, political leaders and others. But also, he is one of those rare people in history who suddenly emerge unexpectedly at a moment. You know, cometh the hour, cometh the man. And Zelensky has certainly proved to be the man.
As you say, history often delivers the unexpected, and that's about the only given. In that context, how do you think that this invasion of Ukraine is going to end?
I think that I don't think anybody is in a position really to predict that. I always find it slightly ironical the way that historians working on the past are always asked about the future. It can come out in several different ways, but I think one thing is certain. When people are now talking about off-ramps of giving Putin a way to back out, I don't think that will be the case. I think that the trouble is that Ukraine cannot allow itself to be in a position where Putin can agree to withdraw and then actually come straight back in again. The old Napoleonic idea of, you know, pull back, ready to jump again. And Putin has proved that he cannot be trusted for a moment on any deal or on any agreement. So I fear that the war is going to grind on, certainly into the winter, maybe even into next year.
Antony Beevor, pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leigh Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.